Hello and welcome, Star People. This is 8 p.m, your intrepid star guide, and this is another episode of the Outlaw Astrology Podcast. This is episode 169, and this is where we dismantle astrological dogma and build a practice rooted in critical thinking, lived experience, and radical honesty. So, some quick housekeeping first. Last episode we talked about growing into your chart rather than being defined by it. If you missed that episode, go back. It sets the foundation for everything we're doing in this arc and in this episode. Okay? Also, you can find us on Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube. You can find the links in the show notes. Like, subscribe, review, and share the podcast. You can do so with the reviewing, especially, and the liking, particularly Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And we have a free and paid version of the Daily Stargazer newsletter, which has a monstrous amount of content behind inside of it. Free and paid versions. You can find that link also in the show notes. And with that said, onward. So, what we're going to do is talk about transits, secondary progressions and cycles, and they're not add-ons to your chart. They're your chart in motion, in time, in dialogue with your actual life. And so, here's the question, here's the thing. If you've ever had a reading that felt accurate but weirdly static, like a snapshot of a person who no longer quite exists, this episode is for you. And the question we're holding today, not what does my chart say, but what does my chart say about right now, about this season, this cycle, this particular stretch of living. Alright. Okay, so, the birth chart is treated like a photograph, okay? That's the frame most of us have. It's a fixed image of who you are, taken at the moment you arrived. How many times have you heard that? I've heard it tons, quite frankly. And there's nothing you can do about it. It's determined. And what it says about you is also determined. And you have to live out this chart. You have no choice. The end. But here's the thing. Photographs don't breathe. Your chart does. And so, not the best metaphor at all. Your chart don't change. When you take a picture of the tree, you took a picture of a tree in a season of its life. That picture don't change. The tree changed, but the picture did not. It does not reflect the tree as it currently is. Your chart, as it's framed as a photograph, don't change. You've changed, it hasn't. Charts breathe, like trees breathe. And so, that's a terrible metaphor. We need to find a better one, and here it is. The chart, in particular the natal chart, is a musical score. It contains the themes, the key, the instruments, but it doesn't tell you which movement you're in, which part of the song, or any of that, and it doesn't tell you what the orchestra sounds like at this particular moment in the performance. Okay? So transits are the conductor's cues. Progressions are the slow evolution of the melody, and cycles are the structure of the whole piece. And so your key takeaway right here is you cannot understand who you are in your life by only looking at the natal chart. That's like trying to know, look at a map of Korea and expect to know where everything in Korea is just by looking at the map. That's not likely. It's not going to happen. You can't just look at a map and expect to see. As I've said, the map is not the territory. I can look at a map and it'll say these mountains are here. This city's right there, but it doesn't tell me what's in the city. It doesn't tell me how far away it is, because maps are misleading, okay? And so using your chart in a way that is static is not going to provide you with a lot of information. Natal charts tell you about that moment. It tells you about what you're working with. This is what you got to work with. It does not say, this is predetermined, too bad for you, you're going to suffer, oh, Kalukale, oh, the horrors, etc. Avoid is what I always say with that, because that quite irritates me. It doesn't give me any power of choice. It makes me a passenger in my own life. It makes somebody else has got the pen and I'm just sitting there over their shoulder saying, ooh, I don't know, do I get to have that? Do I get to do that? Whereas the reframe, which is understanding that your chart, you need to look at not just your natal chart, you also need to look at the transits, your secondary progressions, etc., to have a better understanding of the fullness of you, because you are not one note on a 12-tone scale. Okay? You are the entire scale, and that entire scale has seasons. There's going to be a time when you're going to play this note over that note. Okay? So that's how we're going to work this. And so the first thing we're going to talk about are transits. Instead of seeing transits as climate, we see it as the weather. Is it always sunny in London? No, it's not. Is it always cloudy in, Mumbai? No, it isn't. That's weather. It flows in, it flows out, sometimes sunny, sometimes rainy, sometimes cold. And the cold will come in seasons, and the heat will too come in seasons. So that is what a transit is. Transits are the most immediate conversation in your chart, and that your chart is having this conversation with time. Okay? So weather, not climate. And so the traditional framing is like this. Saturn is transiting your 7th house, and therefore relationships will be hard. Useful, but inaccurate. A transit is not a verdict. It is a conversation starter. So, Saturn transiting your 7th house isn't punishment. It is Saturn asking, what structures are you building in your relationships? In particular, your long-term relationships, not limited to personal. It could be business, collaborative, creative, healing, etc. And what's worth keeping? What's being held together by prayers and hope rather than actual foundations. And so the same transit hits differently depending on where you are in your life, what you've already lived, and what you're ready to see. So that's what we're on about today. What are you willing to see? So, for an example, Saturn return happening at about 28, 29 years of age, lands differently for someone who's been holding their emotions, their thoughts. They're doing the inner work. Maybe they're working with a psychotherapist. They're doing grief work, inner child work with a safe, well-trained, present medical practitioner or what have you, as an example. And let's contrast that with someone who's encountering themselves for the first time. Okay? Someone who's not doing that, meaning that they've reached the same point, the Saturn return. One person has had support and has been working steadily to understand themselves better, and this second person hasn't had that. It's going to be a very different experience. It's the same transit, but it's going to be radically different for each person, and in particular these people in this example. So, we want to reframe it like this. Transits don't happen to you, they happen with you. They are invitations to meet a particular planetary energy in a particular moment with a particular strategy, for example. And so you bring everything you've lived to that meeting. And then we now have secondary progressions. And that is the slow burn of becoming. Why? Well, let's start that. So, transits are the weather. Secondary progressions are the climate. That's the slow, that's the deep shift, that's all of that happening into who you become over years and decades. Okay? So, the method is like this. 1 day of your chart after your birth for 1 year of your life. And so, The progressed chart is your natal chart aged. So, if you were born on November 27th, 1980, that chart would be aged. So every day after your birth, when the chart is finally drawn to that point, all those days will be symbolically a year of your life. And that progressed chart will be your natal chart aged, at which point this will happen. Your progressed sun will be something you're going to want to notice. That's the first thing. And the thing about the progressed sun is that it changes sign roughly every 30 years or so. So meaning that the core identity you were born with, it has gradually evolved, become more adaptable. It's not better. It's not you're standing at the top of a spiritual mountain. That's called spiritual bypassing. We're not doing that here. What we are doing instead is if we have a natal sun in Aries, and they spent their 20s, they spent most of their 20s as that sun in Aries, and suddenly they hit their 30s, and now that sun, which is now progressed, is now in Taurus. You do not treat that progressed Taurus sun as the same person, because they're not the same person, so you cannot read them as if they were, okay? Now, we also have the progressed moon, and it moves through all 12 signs of the zodiac in roughly 27 to 28 years, and spending time in a sign for about 2 to 3 years, and it tracks your the progressed moon tracks your moon cycle. It's basically an accurate tool for understanding your emotional seasons. So that is what your progressed moon cycle is meant to tell you. So you, like I said, you started out as a Aries sun, and suddenly you find yourself being a progressed Taurus sun. That's a totally different experience. You've gone from maybe in your 20s being more independent, impulsive, restless, courageous, brave, wanting to follow the path with heart, to chart your own course, and now suddenly in your 30s you find yourself wanting to slow down. You find yourself wanting to plant roots. You find yourself wanting some stability, want to have some joys of life. You just don't want to run. You want to stay somewhere, stay with some people, and take life slower and enjoy what there is to enjoy, like chocolate ice cream on a hot, humid day, for example. That would be Taurus energy. In addition to that, building stability. Maybe having a home base that you come back to if you like to travel or if you like to learn, that sort of thing. Building the structures and making your life sustainable so that that natal Aries sun has stability. You see, your natal chart don't go away just because you got a secondary progressed sun. It's operating always. It's just that the focus now is on creating the stability that will allow that independence, that spontaneity that Aries is known for, the wanting to be the first to climb that mountain, to go over there, to pioneer, to trailblaze. You now have sustainable, scalable structures beneath you to make that supportive, to make that a growth experience rather than an annoying challenge. Okay, so what we're talking about here, key insight, is that secondary progressions explain why you sometimes feel like a different person than your birth chart describes. You are different. The chart grew with you. The astrologer who reads you at 24 is reading a different person and a different chart than the one that exists at 44. So this is not mysticism. It's the chart being honest about the fact that human beings change. Now, there's a third thing. And so beyond individual transits and progressions, we're always inside larger cycles. And so that would be Saturn cycles, that's about 29 years, Jupiter cycles, which are about 12 years, nodal cycles, about 18.6 years, and the progressed lunar cycle, which is 27 to 28 years. You see? So you've got transits, the weather. You've got secondary progressions, the climate. And now we got the cycles, Saturn, Jupiter, nodal, moon, progressed moon. And these are, where are you in the story? So when I mentioned like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, the cycles tell you which act you're in. Now, if you don't know anything about story, briefly, Act 1 is always the setup. Act 2 always starts in a midpoint. Okay, something bad happened, you know. The hero got up the tree, now he's stuck. That's Act 2. Act 3 is, it ends with a climax, which is, oh my God, the forest is burning, and the hero hasn't gotten out the forest. They've gotten out the tree, which you have to read to find out how they got out of the tree, but now the forest is on fire, and they have to figure out a way to get out of the forest so they can live, to tell the story and bring back the wisdom to the village, etc. Planetary cycles are a way of orienting yourself in your own journey, your own path, your own story, okay? And so, knowing which cycle you're in contextualizes everything else. So, for example, a Saturn opposition around age 14 or 15 thereabouts happens again at age 44, okay? So it's not a random hard period. It's a structural checkpoint, a moment when the architecture of your life is tested. And knowing where you are in it changes how you meet it. And so if you've not heard about that, Saturn oppositions is basically when you're transiting Saturn opposes your natal one. So say you've got Saturn at 0 degrees in Virgo. A Saturn opposition occurs at 0 degrees to about 4 degrees, because in transits I use about a 4-degree orb. That's the padding on either side of exact. So let's say that Saturn, transiting Saturn is at 0 degrees of Pisces. That would be a Saturn opposition. And that means it's a push and a pull, and it's an opportunity to become integrated and aware, because oppositions appear as if the thing is coming from outside of you, as if the challenge, the hard lesson, is being pushed at from outside of you by other people. So some authority figure is doing it, some external force is doing it, and so that Saturn opposition, which happens 14, 15, and then 30 years later at 44, is that integration. Whatever information you now have at 44, you can look back to 14 and 15 and say to yourself, I should probably do some thinking here. I should probably make some adjustments here. That's basically what it means. So Saturn also squares, it also opposes, it comes around, and now you get a second look. So if the natal chart is at 0 degree Saturn in Virgo, that's very discerning, very nitpicky, kind of analytical, practical, not this but that. It's all heady, practical. Whereas Saturn in Pisces at 0 degrees is inviting you to be more imaginative, non-linear, and it's asking you to invite your feelings into the conversation. And Saturn in Pisces is putting structures underneath that Pisces energy, because Virgo energy on its own is wonderful, but it needs a push against. You can't spend your life analyzing everything and discerning everything because you're going to miss things. It's not possible to live up to your ideals. Whereas Saturn in Pisces energy is very spiritual practices that can ground you, taking up meditation to make your mind clearer and more focused, depending on the meditation. It's those sort of things. It's building structures that in the sign that opposes natally, so that you have the opportunity to have structures, to have strategies, so that you can meet your current circumstances in a way that's more coherent, in a way that aligns most with your values. And that's what Saturn gives. It's the ability to be authority. Earlier in your life, you're probably not going to have that when you're younger. When you get to be 44, you'll have enough life experience to look back at previous Saturn squares, oppositions, etc., and returns, and say, okay, this is who I am now. This is what matters to me now. What structures do I have in place? And if it's in, say, the 4th house, which puts Pisces in the 10th, that means what structures do you have at home in your personal life? What ideals do you hold to? Where are you perfectionistic? Where do you use discernment? And the 10th house would be the mystic, where you need to be nonlinear, where you need to invite in the collective unconscious, which invites symbolism, archetypes, etc. Knowing things in nonlinear ways, not just using your brain, because sometimes your brain will your mind and your brain will lead you astray. Okay, so that Saturn opposition is an opportunity in this example for other forms of knowledge and learning and intuiting to be invited into the table, to give you a more integrated and whole way of looking at things instead of just sticking to one strategy, because sometimes life's going to hand you experiences and this one strategy is just not going to be equal to that task. And it will make it difficult for you to meet challenges if you cannot adapt quickly enough. Okay, so the question then shifts from why is everything hard now to what is this cycle asking me to consolidate, to release, to rebuild? So cycles give you a narrative, and the narrative gives you agency. You are not a person things happen to. You are a person moving through a story with its own logic and its own timing and its own seasons. So, here's the way we could do it. And this is how you can start reading the chart as a living document rather than a photograph, as a score rather than a fixed moment. Okay, so here's some questions and some suggestions. So sit with your chart and ask 3 questions. What is the chart saying about your core nature and the themes of your life? 2, what are the current transits and progressions activating or challenging in my life and in myself right now? 3, what cycle am I in, and what does this season ask of me? The natal chart is the who, the transits and the progressions for the sake of this exercise. The transits and progressions are the when, and the cycles are the why it matters now. Okay, so none of these layers replace the others. They're in constant dialogue. And this is what makes astrology a living practice rather than a personality test. You take once and then file away and forget. Okay? And so that's all we have for today. And here's the key takeaway. Your chart is not a fixed verdict handed down at birth. It is a living document in constant dialogue with the time, the experiences, the particular season of life and of you that you absolutely are experiencing right now and moving through. And so the question was never just, what does my chart say? It's, what does my chart say about who I am becoming right now, in this moment, in this cycle? And so here's some other journaling questions and prompts if you like. What where are you right now? Pick one transit or cycle you are aware of, or simply note what feels most alive and most pressurized in your life, and ask, what is this season asking me to look at? What is being activated? What is ready to shift? You do not need to know the astrology perfectly. You just need to be honest about what you're living. And episode 3 of Arc 3 is coming next week, and it's the myth of the complete chart consultation. Why you are the prime authority of your chart, and why no single reading can tell you everything, and why the most important voice in any chart interpretation is yours. Alrighty, and so you can find Outlaw Astrology on YouTube, link in the show notes. You can find us on Pinterest, also link in show notes, and on Instagram, link in show notes. Daily Stargazer newsletter is free and paid. There is an archive of 600 posts and almost 100 podcast episodes plus and counting. And be so kind as to like, share the Outlaw Astrology podcast where you can with friends who might be in need and might be interested, because it helps us grow and gets us out there where other people can hear us too and benefit. And thank you very much, star people, for listening. Stay curious, stay critical, and remember, the chart is alive because you are alive. Peace and astro magic.